Hello there, it's good to have you here. I'm the Last Mixer and welcome back to another early access dinosaur game. Much like Second Extinction, this one has a lot of promise. So, today, let's take a look at Prehistoric Kingdom. The game was released as an early access title on April 27th, 2022. It was developed by Blue Meridian and published by Crytivo, both of whom don't really have any games of note in their history, other than maybe the Universe Sim made by Crytivo. I will admit that this video was a different experience for me to make, as the footage you are seeing here is the first time I have ever played the game. With Primal Carnage and Second Extinction, I had quite a few hours already put into both, so I more or less knew how the video or videos were going to go and what I wanted to say. But with this one, I was truly diving into the deep end, and all of this information was coming at me for the first time, just as it might be for you right now. You begin the game by selecting either challenge or sandbox mode, choosing a map, and selecting a difficulty level, which determines your starting creatures. The maps in this game are absolutely massive too, so running out of building space isn't really an issue, which is awesome. As you might expect, in challenge mode you have limited money and a park rating to worry about, while sandbox is just a free-for-all, if you can think it, you can create it kind of situation. Now, since it's called Prehistoric Kingdom and not Dinosaur Kingdom, you get to build a park filled with not only dinosaurs, but also extinct mammals like mammoths, woolly rhinos, and even the Smilodon. This was actually one of the biggest selling points for me personally, as there really hasn't been a lot of games that have these post-dinosaur era creatures in them. The main ones that come to mind being the classic gem of a game, Zoo Tycoon 2, and Far Cry Primal, a first-person game set in 10,000 BC. I know there are others, but it's not really super common. Prehistoric Kingdom is a park building and management game with all of the expected finance and stat screens in the management section, including guest stuff, which I just don't care about. I tend to ignore them more often than not, and you can generally get away with doing so in this game, as guests do have needs, but plopping down a couple buildings solves most issues, and at this point guests are pretty much lifeless little ants with the most basic AI as showcased here. One of the first visitors to my park was an 80s porn star, which worried me a little but also made me laugh my ass off, so I guess it was a positive in the end. The game has a heavy focus on creative freedom, and I do mean heavy, like Argentinosaurus heavy. Much like Planet Coaster and Planet Zoo, you can build everything in your park piece by piece, from the ground up with the game's modular building system. If you have no patience and or are lacking in building skills like myself, then there are prefabs available to place down, which are just pre-built things that fit different purposes. Personally, I use these for most of my buildings, as I don't care about building things for my guests, but all of my exhibits I built piece by piece, and each one took me around half an hour to 40 minutes to fully complete. Speaking of exhibits, this is where the game truly shines. The process of outlining an area with fencing, clearing the space, and then taking terraforming tools to the environment, and carefully crafting each part of the exhibit with foliage, rocks, logs, and fire is just such an enjoyable process. There were a couple times where I was so invested in my exhibit that I genuinely forgot I was recording, and ended up with a half-hour clip of gameplay that was supposed to be 10 minutes. Not to mention the fact that just chilling and building an exhibit to the sound of falling rain was the most relaxed and at ease I have been in quite some time. The game has some seriously impressive tools too, all at your disposal. You can move, rotate, scale, and color things to your heart's desire, and there are even little quality of life improvements that can save a lot of building time, like being able to select which specific foliage you want to place down in the brush tool, or get rid of with the bulldoze tool, as well as being able to duplicate any item or group of items at will. The controls are solid, the UI is clean, and the options seem pretty much limitless, even if there is a somewhat limited selection of building items on offer, which is not a problem at all and to be expected this early on in the game's lifespan. There is actually quite a lot of stuff here if you spend a couple hours playing, and while there is a basic tutorial to tell you how to get started, you're mostly on your own. While initially I felt a little overwhelmed by this, I pretty quickly got the hang of the mechanics and came to appreciate the game not holding my hand for the first half hour. It was an awesome experience to just kinda sit back and let myself learn everything at my own pace, without the tutorial blasting me with a pop-up every 5 seconds to tell me what I should be doing, and why it's probably a bad idea to put a large carnivore behind a glass fence. Speaking of things behind fences, or not, depending on what kind of park manager you are, we of course have the stars of the show, the prehistoric creatures themselves. In a similar fashion to Jurassic World Evolution 2, you have a world map and a selection of dig sites all containing different creatures and skins for them. Unlocking new dig sites is done by increasing your star rating, and the actual animals themselves are unlocked by earning science points, which you just seem to accumulate over time, although there does seem to be a cap, which from what I could tell is based on your star rating. fascinating. You then head over to the nursery and do some science. When enough science has been done, you get a prehistoric animal to place down wherever you see fit. Any animal can be picked up and moved freely after they have been placed down, so you don't have to worry about tranquilizing escaped creatures. Well, you don't have to worry about escapes or guest deaths at all, because at this point in time, they aren't in the game. The animals are pretty chill, and more advanced behaviors like socializing and interacting with other species doesn't seem to be a thing yet. In the most recent devlog, it's mentioned that more complex behaviors involving things like the creatures playing and acknowledging/interacting with each other are currently being worked on and should be ready for the game's first major update, so I imagine this won't be a problem for long. Of course, this sort of animation takes a lot of time and effort, even more so to make it smooth and polished, so I am perfectly okay with waiting for it to be implemented. If you want to check out the roadmap for the game and see what's being cooked up, then I have left a link to the Trello page in the description below. Even with this stuff missing, the prehistoric animals do not disappoint. This is probably the best texture work and modeling I have seen in a prehistoric themed game, and with games like Jurassic World Evolution 2 and even something like The Isle, there is some decent competition out there, and I'm not even running the game at max settings. The animals just look fantastic, and their movements are pretty damn realistic, while the animation work for hills, where the legs, body, and overall weight of the creature shift and move according to the terrain, is actually pretty damn solid. Well, for the most part. If a hill is too steep, things can get really janky, but I imagine this sort of animation is exceptionally difficult to code, and the devs have mentioned in previous devlogs that it is a work in progress, and we are only 3-ish months into early access anyway. To my knowledge, a lot, if not most, or all of these designs are paleo-accurate as well, or pretty close, so realism is definitely a focus here, which is more than most games of this ilk can say. All of the creatures in the game have habitat needs, so you'll need to place the right amount of foliage from the right biome to keep them happy, which I guess if I got wiped off the face of the planet by an ass of an asteroid or the heat melting my icy home, I would be a bit picky too. You have to place feeders as well, for fairly obvious reasons, but the herbivores can snack on the environs if they need to. Also, quite amusingly, dung beetles are an important part of a functioning park, as they'll do the crappy job that no one else will. Overall, as long as you check what they like to eat and where they like to live, they'll be pretty happy, kinda like me in a way. Of course, I would be doing the game and all of you watching a great disservice if I didn't mention the fabulous legend who will introduce you to all of your prehistoric critters, Nigel Marvin. Ah man, my boy is back and it's so good to have him here. Every time you release a new species, and sometimes when you check back in on one you already have, Nigel will give you some facts about the creature and make a couple jokes.
In its heyday, Torvosaurus was what zoologists would call a cosmopolitan species. Now I know what you're thinking, and no, that does not mean that this dinosaur enjoys delicious fruity cocktails. Cosmopolitan refers to species with nearly global distribution.
As a kid who grew up watching Prehistoric Park, which was a 6-episode series about bringing back extinct animals through a time portal, starring Nigel, this is just absolute heaven for me.
Many of its fossils have been excavated in tar pits, with the most prolific site being La Brea in Los Angeles, California.
Hearing him talk about prehistoric animals brings back waves of nostalgia, and I would be lying if I said that all of these memories coming back didn't make me a bit emotional. And any game that can elicit an emotional response out of me in the first few hours is absolutely worth talking about. And it's not just the Prehistoric Park connection either, but seeing these beautiful creatures that time has left behind just doing their thing and living life in a habitat that I built, man, that's a special feeling and just makes my day. Brings back that wonder that I felt as a kid. It's a feeling that only the original Jurassic Park and the Jurassic World Evolution games have managed to bring back, and I am 100% here for it. My younger self would have been in complete awe with a game like this, especially with the graphics that it boasts. From the environment to the creatures, it all looks pretty damn good. There are issues with textures being weird and animals clipping through stuff, and some visual problems with things like the edges of water sometimes behaving weirdly if you edit the terrain around them. There is room to improve for sure, but as far as major bugs go, well, there are none. Not for me at least. In 10 hours of playtime, the game didn't crash once, and any minor glitches I had didn't affect my enjoyment of the game whatsoever. The game works, and it works well. It's a shame that these days that seems to be the exception to the norm as opposed to the norm itself. Even AAA games seem to come out of the oven half-baked way too often, and so it's refreshing and awesome to see an early access title with its major bugs seemingly squashed. I owe it to you folks to be honest with my review and not let nostalgia or a positive bias towards prehistoric life blind me to the problems that the game has, and it does have them. But I mean, I expected a crash or two, or UI elements not working properly, or something to get in the way of my enjoyment, but nah, that just didn't happen. The game is sitting at an asking price of $33.99 Canadian on Steam, or your regional equivalent, which, while I think that's maybe a little bit pricey for early access, the game seems to go on sale during Steam's larger sale times like summer and winter, so if you are a bit wary of the price at the moment, the game will probably be on sale again later this year. However, if you love prehistoric wildlife as much as I do, I think you'll absolutely get your money's worth out of the game. With all that being said, while Prehistoric Kingdom certainly has a decent journey ahead of it to become one of the best prehistoric-themed gaming experiences out there, it is still very fun and well made. It has a wealth of creative tools, great graphics, and a solid soundtrack that fits the theme of the game exceptionally well. And of course, some truly majestic creatures that remind us of what used to roam our planet eons ago, and while time may have forgotten them, I certainly never will. Thank you all very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, then consider giving it a like and subscribing. If you are subscribed, then hit that bell so you don't miss any new videos. I always appreciate the support. Much love, take care, and until next time, have a good one.